Morning, everyone. Thank you. And there we are. So, again, morning, everyone. I'm Vadim. I'm not supposed to be here, and yeah, first of all, sorry, I'm not Elvis in any way. I don't know where he is, probably on Mars. And today, I have a really brief lightning talk for you. Basically, I'm in the beginning of a process of preparing this talk, the full 30 or 40 or like an hour-long talk. And this is just a sneak peek of what I'm going to present later this season. So, who am I? I work at HTML Academy, based in St. Petersburg, Russia. You've probably seen me or heard me on podcasts, on other conferences. And what I do, I teach people front-end technologies. HTML, CSS, and yeah, that's it. Yeah, you got it right. On a JavaScript day of CSS-Minsk-JS conference, I'm gonna talk about HTML. This is weird, but I have a reason for that. You probably have seen the title of this talk. It's HTML for Cynics. It's Semantics for Cynics. And I think JavaScript developers are the biggest cynics in front-end community because they just don't care. And I think they have a right to care less than, I don't know, HTML coders. But let's dive in. You know what it is? It's not related to military in any way. It's actually official semantics logo. So there was a HTML5 rebranding back in 2010 or something, like 12. Do you remember this HTML5 logo and things like that? They also published logotypes for every technology. And this is official semantics logotype. So print your T-shirts with it if you like it. But I used to give talks in previous years, like back in 2012 or around that time, maybe 2010, about HTML5 semantics and things like that. And I used to tell people, look, there is new hope on the horizon. There are new tags we can use every day to make our interfaces better. Look, there is a bright future. And this didn't work, to be honest. No one cares. And I decided to refresh this talk and try to look at the same problem from a different angle. Because these days, developers ask themselves really important questions, like, be or strong? Like, this is a really philosophical question, I would say. Or section or article? Just think about it. Section or article? Div or span? You probably have an answer. Like, div is for blocks, block elements, span is for inline elements. Yeah, or maybe I is for icons. Who use I for icons? I hate you. But no, it's beyond the topic. But to be honest, it doesn't matter at all. All those questions are irrelevant to what's happening in our interfaces, to what's happening in our code. Well, it does matter if you care, but you don't have to. Like, I care about those questions. I hate people who use I for icons. That's my problem. But you don't have to if you don't feel like it. But what matters? What matters is UX, user experience. So for everything you do, there should be a reason. Not because you like it or not, but because it makes interfaces better for users. So their user experience becomes better. That's the only reason to choose one framework over another. That's the only reason to choose strong or B or whatever. So let's focus on user experience first, and then on our needs second. And there are two main areas that you can split this semantics to interface semantics and content semantics. And I invented those, basically. They are not from spec. But I decided to split those in two parts. And I'll briefly go through each one of them. Interface, for example, landmarks, header, main, aside, footer, those elements on the level of a body of your document that matters, that could be used to navigate your interfaces better. The same important lays in HTML headings, H1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Whoever used H6? Well, you probably mistyped or something. But these days, sometimes I see H3, but not lower than that. But that's all right. If you use headings in any ways, it's really good. And form elements, field set, legend, input, those are really important. I'm not talking about choosing between strong and B and I or EM or section or article. I'm asking you to mark up your interfaces with those tags. Those are really important. Those make difference, actual difference. And interactive elements, like choosing between button and link, everything that could be clicked should be button or link, basically. Labels, there should be no empty elements on your pages. This mistake is so common these days. Developers just create empty links that could be clicked, but there is no content associated with it. So it's not clear what you're clicking, actually, if you don't see it, for example. So basically, those interface elements, they help keyboard and screen reader users. Big part of your audience, actually. I'm a heavy keyboard user myself, and it pisses me off when you disable outline, for example. A good friend of mine from St. Petersburg, he can't use mouse because mouse is a very precise tool, if you didn't know. You have to point really accurately to achieve something. So he uses keyboard for navigating interfaces, and you're pissing him off too. So interface. And as an example of using some landmark elements, I have an example like CSS-Minsk-JS site. For example, if you open navigation menu in VoiceOver screen reader and at CSS-Minsk-JS site, you'll see the list of all headings on the site. This is good, because you don't have to go from element to element while navigating interface. You can choose where to go. You can quickly jump to part of a page you're interested, because screen reader will read all those headings, and you can choose the ones you're looking for. Well, this structure is a bit flat, like H1 and the rest. You can do better, I know, but it's much better than nothing, because on most I know sites when you on which you open this menu and you see nothing, it's just empty. But it's not only about headings, also landmarks. On the main page of CSS-Minsk-JS site, there are two landmarks: banner, it's at the top header basically, and main landmark, it's a content. And this is really great, but it could be better. For example, there could be banner, navigation, main, complementary content info. Basically, it's header, nav, main, aside, and footer. This is it. You just use those elements I listed before. Header, navigation, main, aside, and footer. And you get those for free. This navigation is enabled in all screen readers if you use them. So they also have not just headings, because imagine a news site, for example. There could be hundreds of headings for news articles, for example. But if you can choose section of a site, navigation or main content area or some additional info and footer, it makes navigation, your interface, so much better. And the same applies to content. This is the second part of semantics. It's very important to specify language of your document. It's important to use headings in content too, not just in interface. Use images right, and use fancy figures to insert code samples, images, and things like that. And lists. You might ask why lists are not in this list of bullshit questions. Because lists, who cares about lists? But lists are actually very important. And I realized it not a long time ago. But content semantics are mostly useful for search engines, reader modes, screen readers, and new devices. But let's see how lists work first. On the main page of CSS-Minsk-JS site, there is a list of speakers, as far as I remember. And once you focus on this list, screen reader will tell you list of 14 items. So you can guess, so you can understand that there are 14 speakers. But on inner pages of CSS-Minsk-JS site, there are no lists. I think on a schedule page, yeah, there's no lists. There are no lists. So you can go one by one, and you can just hope for the best, because it will not announce the length of the list. Maybe it's infinite scrolling, you know. So you can go one by one. Yeah. So it's really useful to include those. And once you're on an item of a list, it will give you info that it's one of and length of a list. So lists are very important. And also new devices like that. If you use proper form controls, this is a screenshot from video, like 8-minute video from WWDC this year, and they suggest using proper HTML elements to achieve better results on Apple Watch, because their new operating system on Apple Watch supports browsing actual pages. They're simplified, there's no web fonts, there's no service workers, and something else is limited. But otherwise, it's just a small site on your wrist. So if you use proper HTML elements, you'll get better experience. The same applies to form controls, Safari Reader as well. So if you mark your article as an article element, for example, it will look better. If you supply some schema attributes, it will also look better, and it will be more readable, and you'll have a sneak peek of your article on a main screen. And the same applies to figure, IMG, fig caption. You can show your pictures with description, very good, using semantic HTML. And block quotes, and yeah, even strong and EM. They are even being in a bullshit list, they're still useful. Less useful than other elements, but still. But apps, you might say, applications. You just showed us sites that you can read, but we develop rich internet applications, or single-page application, or what's the new word for that? And I have an answer even for this. Like, imagine typical page. There's a fly. All right. Imagine typical page many years ago. Like, let's guess what's this. This is probably a body element. Yeah, this is all right. This is body element, and there's nothing in it. And I'm sorry. Yeah, this is probably H1. This is P. This is H2. This is another paragraph. And yeah, it's boring. It's simple. But we're talking about apps. Let's make another step. Let's go to websites. And this is a typical website of 2018, probably. Logo, like header. This is probably a site. This is the main content. This is footer. This is pretty simple. I guess you can guess what elements to use, like header, aside, main, footer, and there's nothing complicated about it. But if you look at application, it gets much more complicated. This is a typical messenger. Like on the left side, you have list of your contacts. This is your chat. This is the area where you type. This is the button to send. And these are some options you can switch. Like this is actually a Telegram interface. on a desktop. And how to mark up this? Typical developer would just draw boxes on a screen. Div, 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 and maybe button. And this is it. But you can mark up this interface using semantic HTML and help screen reader users or keyboard users to use your interfaces better. For example, this is, it's hard to guess, but this is probably a separate area of this interface. And there's a list of contacts and a header on top of it, where probably contacts is written. It consists of header and some elements. And by pressing those elements, you're choosing where you go. So you're basically switching tabs while you navigate in this interface. And every part of this interface could have a header like this. This is also a main area of this element. And this is navigation. So you can mark up those interfaces using just by analyzing interface. If it consists of typical things that I showed you, like header, footer, main, navigation, and things like that. You can easily mark up those, and for example, this is clearly a header of this section. This is clearly header of this section. Those are headers like H2, H2, H3, and yeah, and like that. And this is typical navigation. Navigation is like home, where you go every time you don't know where to go. So it is possible to include the same semantic elements, the same headers, footers, the same buttons, links, and things like that in this interface to make interfaces like I showed you before pop up over your page and announce important parts of this interface. So that's why I encourage you to look closer at those few elements that I mentioned before and use those in your interfaces to make them look better, to make them sound better, to make them behave better for keyboard users, for example. And don't be afraid, because this is not as complicated as it sounds. Like, as we speak, there is a master class of Patrick Lauke happening somewhere there, and I have no idea what you're doing here. This is very important for JavaScript developers to understand accessible rich internet application specification, and Patrick is talking about. So stand up and go to this workshop if you have a chance, if you signed up for it. But otherwise, this is just the beginning of my talk, and I'll deliver something more, probably an article, probably something bigger, because I want to change your perception of semantics. It's not something useless, because you don't have to care about it. You just have to use useful parts, like JavaScript good parts, semantics good parts. You should just use good parts of it to make your interfaces better. And I showed you just a few simple things you can do. And there are some links there are some articles you can read. There's a really cool inclusive components site and a book recently published. Some other articles, so you can see all of those navigating to this link. This is where everything published on web, so you can go there and see what's going on. And yeah, this is it for me.
Vadim, thank you very much. Can I invite you for a short interview?
Thanks.
By the way, I need to make a short announcement. We have another co-host here, Coco. Let me introduce. Okay, thank you. Now, she will help me to do an interview. So,
Sure.
if you don't mind. Now, the first question is, for me, is that personally, with semantics, I have only one problem. That a lot of developers...
Only one?
Only one. Only one, just one. A lot of developers choose front-end simply for one reason. It's more easier to show results of your work. Like, I work a lot, and I can show a website. People can play with it, and I can see their faces, like where they're enlightened when they're working with it. But with semantics, I think the biggest problem is that you not always can do that. And previously, for example, when Chrome developers tools didn't have like semantics tab,
accessibility tab, yeah.
Accessibility tab, you as a developer maybe didn't know how it's working or how it's look. So this Apple Watch approach, when you can see results of your work with accessibility. So what do you think about that? So is it worth to do that, or is it a bad idea?
If you're not drawing boxes on a page, if you're not creating pictures, but you're creating interfaces, you should have known that interfaces could be navigated and used in many different ways, not just clicked by mouse, for example. And if you're mouse-clicked interface developer, then it's all right. Otherwise, you should care, at least about those things I mentioned, those few things. Just a handful of HTML elements, a few attributes, and you're good to go. Seriously, like, just put headings in your interfaces, for Christ's sake.
So what's the biggest point for you was what drive you mostly insane? Like, for example, people not using heading correctly, or what your single advice would be to change it?
Use, in your single-page applications, use links. Seriously. Like div on click, or span on click, or div roll button on click, or something like this. This is terrible. Seriously. If you cannot copy link to a page, if you cannot open in a new tab, this is just a terrible experience.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So,